A billionaire crashed his Porsche into a ditch on a back road in New Jersey at 11 at night. Broken leg, 3 cracked ribs, blood pooling under the dashboard. 14 cars drove past in 23 minutes. Nobody stopped. Then, a beat-up minivan pulled over. A 34-year-old single mom stepped out, 2 kids asleep in the back. All she had was a first aid kit from Dollar Tree. She wasn't a doctor. She worked 2 jobs, just finished her night shift at a nursing home. But 8 years ago, she was a combat medic in Afghanistan. Her hands had kept soldiers alive in Kandahar. America just forgot. She had 7 minutes before Anthony Grant bled out. If she saved him, everything about her life would change. If she failed, she'd have to explain to the police why a single mom was pulling a billionaire from a wreck in the middle of the night with her children watching from the back seat. 45 minutes earlier, Anthony Grant was doing something he almost never did. He was driving himself. He just left a board meeting at Grant Tech's Midtown office. 9 hours of shareholders telling him his company needed new leadership. 9 hours of people he'd made rich suggesting he step aside. His chief of staff had offered to call the car. His assistant had texted twice, asking if he wanted the driver. Anthony had ignored them both. He wanted silence. He wanted the wheel in his hands. He wanted to feel like he was in control of something, even if it was just a car on a highway. The Porsche Cayenne was worth $300,000. Leather interior, adaptive cruise control, collision avoidance system, night vision assist, every safety feature money could buy. And none of it mattered when a white-tailed deer leaped out of the tree line on Route 22 at 63 miles per hour. Anthony swerved. The tires hit standing water. The car hydroplaned. Then everything happened at once. The steering wheel jerked. The back end swung wide. The guardrail came at him sideways. Metal hit metal. Glass exploded. The car flipped once, twice, and slid down the embankment into a drainage ditch. Then, silence. Anthony opened his eyes. Or thought he did. Everything was dark and tilted wrong. He was hanging sideways, held in place by the seatbelt cutting into his chest. The windshield was gone. The dashboard had collapsed inward, pinning his right leg at an angle that sent white-hot pain shooting up into his hip every time he breathed. He could taste blood, copper, and salt. It was running down from somewhere above his left eye, pooling in the corner of his mouth. His ribs screamed when he inhaled. 3 of them, maybe 4 cracked or broken. He didn't know. What he knew was the pain and the smell. Gasoline. Sweet and chemical, growing stronger by the minute, leaking from somewhere underneath him. He tried to reach his phone. His right arm worked. His left was pinned between the door and the center console. He stretched his right hand toward the passenger floor where his iPhone had landed during the first roll. 2 feet. That's all it was. 24 inches between his fingertips and the device that could summon helicopters, private ambulances, the best trauma surgeons in the tri-state area. A phone worth $1,200, connected to an account worth $14 billion. He couldn't reach it. Anthony Grant. Forbes, 400. Tech visionary. The man who'd built a fintech empire from nothing. He was hanging sideways in a ditch, bleeding from his head, smelling gasoline, and he could not reach a phone 2 feet away. He started shouting. His voice came out broken, ragged, but he shouted anyway. "Help! Somebody help me! I'm down here! Please!" The first headlights came 7 minutes after the crash. Anthony saw them sweep across the tops of the trees above the embankment, bright and moving fast. They didn't slow down. The second car came 4 minutes later. Same thing. Headlights painting the darkness, then gone. 3, 5, 7 cars, each one a flash of light and the hiss of tires on wet pavement. Each one a person who might have glanced at the broken guardrail, might have noticed the skid marks, might have thought about pulling over. None of them did. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it the bystander effect. The idea that the more people who witness an emergency, the less likely any single one of them is to help. Everyone assumes someone else will stop, someone else will call, someone else will do the hard thing so they don't have to. On that empty highway in New Jersey, Anthony Grant was learning what that theory feels like when you're the one bleeding in the ditch. 10 cars. 12. 13. He'd stopped shouting by car number 9. His voice was gone. His vision was starting to blur at the edges the way a television screen fades when you hold the power button. The pain in his leg had shifted from sharp to dull, which he somehow knew was worse. The gasoline smell was stronger now. 14 cars passed Anthony Grant in 23 minutes. 14 sets of headlights, 14 chances, 14 people who decided that whatever was happening on the side of Route 22 was not their problem. Then the 15th set of headlights appeared, moving slower than the others. A minivan. It passed the broken guardrail, and its brake lights flashed red. It slowed. It stopped. It reversed. Anthony watched, through fading vision, as a figure stepped out. Small. Moving fast. Coming toward the embankment. The woman who stopped that night had every reason to keep driving. 2 children asleep in her back seat. A job she couldn't afford to be late for. A life already stretched past breaking. But she stopped anyway. And what she did in the next 7 minutes is something those 14 other drivers will never be able to undo. Stay with me. Danielle Carter saw the guardrail first, bent and torn, reflecting her headlights like a wound in the metal. Then she saw the skid marks, then the darkness beyond the shoulder where the embankment dropped away. She was 11 miles from home. Malik was asleep behind her, his head tilted against the window, his Spider-Man backpack clutched to his chest like a stuffed animal. Nia was in her car seat, thumb in her mouth, dead to the world. Danielle had picked them up from Miss Yvonne next door at 9:30 because Miss Yvonne had a doctor's appointment at 6 in the morning and couldn't keep them overnight. So Danielle had brought them to Sunrise Senior Care for the last 3 hours of her shift, let them sleep on the break room couch, and carried them to the minivan when her shift ended at 11. This was her life, stitching together childcare and work schedules and favors and exhaustion into something that barely held together every single day. Her first instinct when she saw that guardrail was to keep driving, get the kids home, get them into real beds, get 3 hours of sleep before the alarm went off for her morning shift at the laundromat. Then she saw the shape in the ditch, the outline of a vehicle, upside down, no lights on, and something inside Danielle Carter shifted. Not in her mind, deeper than that, in her hands, in the muscles of her shoulders, in the part of her nervous system that had been rewired by 3 years in a combat zone. It wasn't courage. It wasn't heroism. It was muscle memory. The kind that gets burned into your body when you've spent 3 years pulling soldiers out of burning vehicles in Kandahar. The kind that doesn't ask permission. It just moves. Danielle pulled over. She put the minivan in park, turned on her hazard lights, looked in the rearview mirror at her children. Malik shifted in his sleep. Nia didn't move. 4 seconds. That's how long Danielle sat there. 4 seconds to weigh everything. Her children, the darkness, the stranger, the risk. She opened her door. The rain had slowed to a mist. The grass on the embankment was slick and wet. Danielle half ran, half slid down the slope, her sneakers sinking into mud until she reached the overturned Porsche. She dropped to her knees beside the shattered driver's window, and she saw him, a man mid-40s hanging sideways from his seatbelt, blood on his face, eyes barely open. His right leg was pinned under the collapsed dashboard, bent at an angle that made her stomach tighten, but it was the wound on his left thigh that made her breath catch. A piece of metal from the dashboard had punctured the muscle. Not an artery, not yet, but the blood was flowing steady and dark, soaking his pants, dripping onto the crumpled roof below him. She could smell gasoline. Strong. Getting stronger. "Can you hear me?" Danielle said. Her voice was sharp, controlled. Not a question. A command. "I need you to stay awake." "What's your name?" His lips moved. Almost no sound. Then, "Anthony." "Okay, Anthony. I'm gonna get you out of here. But I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that for me?" A weak nod. Every first responder learns the same rule. Do not move a trauma patient unless there is an immediate threat to life. Spinal injury. Internal bleeding. Moving someone with a broken back can paralyze them. Moving someone with a fractured neck can kill them. Danielle knew the rule. She'd followed it dozens of times in the field. But she also knew something else. She knew what gasoline smells like right before it ignites. She'd learned that lesson outside Kabul when a convoy vehicle caught fire, and she had 45 seconds to pull 2 soldiers out before the fuel tank blew. This car was leaking fuel. The electrical system was sparking intermittently. She could see a faint blue flash near the engine block every few seconds. The rule said don't move him. The smell said move him now. She ran back up the embankment to her minivan, opened the back, grabbed the first aid kit. It was a small red pouch she'd bought at Dollar Tree for $4.99 3 years ago. She'd never opened it. Inside, she found 4 gauze pads, a roll of medical tape, 1 elastic bandage, and a pair of latex gloves. She looked at what she had. Then she looked at the $300,000 vehicle crumpled in the ditch with a man bleeding inside it. This would have to be enough. Danielle pulled on the gloves and slid back down the embankment. She knelt beside Anthony and assessed what she was working with. Right leg pinned under the dashboard. Possible fracture of the tibia based on the angle and the swelling already visible through his torn pants. Painful, but not immediately life-threatening. 3 ribs, maybe 4. She could tell by the way he was breathing. Short, shallow gasps that caught at the top. He was guarding his left side. Broken ribs are dangerous because of what's underneath them. Lungs. Spleen. But his breathing while shallow was even. No crackling sound. No sucking wound. His lungs were intact. For now. The laceration on his forehead was bleeding freely, but head wounds always look worse than they are. Lots of blood vessels close to the surface. Messy, but manageable. The thigh wound was the problem. The piece of metal had gone in about 2 inches, and when Danielle pressed gently around the edges, she could feel the steady pulse of blood pushing out. Not arterial. Arterial blood sprays. This was flowing. Venous. But it was flowing fast, and it had been flowing for a long time. She needed to stop the bleeding before she did anything else. Danielle unclipped her own belt. Brown leather. Worn soft from years of use. She looped it around Anthony's upper thigh 2 inches above the wound and pulled it tight, then tighter. In the Army, she'd learned that a tourniquet applied within the first few minutes of a major bleed can mean the difference between life and death. She didn't have a real tourniquet. The Dollar Tree kit didn't come with one. But a leather belt pulled tight enough, positioned correctly above the wound, could slow the blood flow enough to buy time. Not hours, minutes. But minutes were all she needed. Anthony groaned. His eyes squeezed shut. "I know it hurts," Danielle said. "That's good. Pain means you're still here. Stay with me, Anthony. Tell me something. You got kids?" He shook his head. "Barely a movement. Wife." His eyes opened. Unfocused. Looking at her but looking through her. "Divorced," he whispered. "Nobody's waiting for me." Danielle held that sentence for a moment. A man worth $14 billion, and nobody was waiting for him at home. She thought about Malik and Nia asleep in the minivan 30 feet above her. She had nothing. A 1-bedroom apartment. A couch she slept on. $47 in her checking account until Friday. But she had 2 people who needed her to come home. Anthony Grant had everything. And he had no one. "Mama?" The voice came from above, small and scared. Malik was standing at the top of the embankment in his pajamas, holding Nia's hand. Nia was crying. Danielle's heart cracked in half. "Stay in the car, baby. Mama's helping someone. Don't come out. Lock the doors." "Can you do that for me?" Mama Nia's scared. "I know, baby. Tell her Mama's coming. Count to 100 for me. Okay, I'll be there before you finish. Go. Now." Malik pulled Nia back toward the minivan. Danielle heard the door shut, heard the lock click. She turned back to Anthony. The gasoline smell was stronger now. She could see it. A dark puddle spreading beneath the car, creeping toward the engine block where the electrical sparks were still flashing. The belt was holding. The bleeding had slowed, but his leg was still trapped, and the car was becoming a bomb. Danielle looked at the crumpled metal trapping Anthony's leg, looked at the growing puddle of gasoline underneath the car, and made a decision that went against every protocol she'd ever learned. What Danielle does next goes against basic emergency training. But sometimes following the rules means watching someone die, and Danielle Carter was not going to let that happen. Not tonight. To understand why Danielle stopped that night, you have to understand who she used to be. Danielle Carter grew up in West Baltimore in a neighborhood where the row houses leaned against each other like tired old men, and the corner stores had more bulletproof glass than windows. Her mother Charlene worked as a home health aide, traveling from house to house across the city, bathing elderly patients and administering medications and changing wound dressings for $11 an hour. Her father left when Danielle was 6. No argument, no goodbye, just an empty closet and a note on the kitchen table that said, "I'm sorry." Charlene raised 3 children alone. Danielle was the oldest, then her brother Darnell, then her sister Tasha. They shared 2 bedrooms in a house that leaked when it rained and froze when the heating bill went unpaid. Charlene worked doubles most weeks, sometimes triples. She'd come home at midnight smelling like rubbing alcohol and latex gloves, and she'd still make sure the kids had eaten, still check homework, still iron school uniforms for the morning. One thing Charlene Carter said to her children every single day. She said it so often it became the rhythm of their childhood, as constant as the sound of the radiator clicking on and off. You don't walk past someone who needs help. I don't care how tired you are. I don't care if you're late. I don't care if they're a stranger. You stop. You help. That's what people do. Danielle carried that sentence through everything that came after. At 18, she enlisted in the United States Army. She wanted out of Baltimore. She wanted to matter. She wanted to use her hands for something that counted. They trained her as a 68 Whiskey, a combat medic, the person who runs toward the gunfire while everyone else is running away. The person who puts their hands on a wound and says, "I've got you," while bullets are hitting the dirt 3 feet away. She deployed to Afghanistan 3 times. Kandahar, Helmand, Kabul. 3 tours in a country where the temperature hit 130 degrees and the sound of explosions became background noise. She saved 17 soldiers. 17 men and women who went home to their families because Danielle Carter kept her hands steady and her mind clear while the world was on fire around her. The incident that earned her the Bronze Star happened during her 2nd tour. An IED hit the lead vehicle in a convoy outside Kandahar, 2 soldiers trapped inside. The vehicle was burning. Ammunition was cooking off rounds, popping in the fire like deadly fireworks. Everyone pulled back. Standard protocol: wait for the vehicle to stop burning. Recover the bodies later. Danielle didn't pull back. She ran toward the fire. She pulled Private First Class Williams out through the shattered rear window while the vehicle was still in flames. Then she went back in for Corporal Davis. She got him out 11 seconds before the fuel tank exploded. She took shrapnel in her left shoulder, a piece of metal the size of a dime buried in the muscle. She finished treating both soldiers before she mentioned her own wound. That was Danielle Carter in Afghanistan. Brave, certain, necessary. Then she came home. The nightmares started 3 weeks after her discharge. She'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, reaching for a medical kit that wasn't there. The sound of a car backfiring would send her to the floor. Crowded rooms made her chest tighten until she couldn't breathe. The VA diagnosed her with post-traumatic stress disorder and prescribed medication that made her feel like she was living underwater. Her husband, Marcus, had married Danielle before her first deployment. He'd promised to wait, and he had waited. But the woman who came home was not the woman who'd left. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't be touched without flinching. She couldn't sit in a restaurant without positioning herself facing the door with her back to the wall. Marcus tried. For 2 years he tried. Then he stopped trying. The divorce was finalized when Nia was 8 months old. He got the house, the car, most of the savings. Danielle got custody of 2 children and a duffel bag full of medals that didn't pay rent. She applied to 4 hospitals. Rejected by all of them. Her military medical certifications didn't transfer to civilian credentials. 3 years of saving lives in combat. 17 confirmed saves, a Bronze Star, and she couldn't get a job drawing blood at a clinic in Newark. The same hands that had pulled soldiers from burning vehicles weren't qualified to take a pulse in a civilian hospital. She found work as a nursing home aide at Sunrise Senior Care in Irvington. Night shift, $13.50 an hour, no health insurance, no retirement plan. She changed diapers. She bathed patients who couldn't bathe themselves. She held the hands of dying people whose families never visited. During the day, she worked at a laundromat, folding other people's clothes for $9 an hour. She had saved lives in Kandahar. Now she was changing bedpans at a nursing home. She had earned a Bronze Star. Now she was earning $13.50 an hour. She had been somebody. Now she was nobody. But that night, on that empty highway, with 2 children sleeping in her back seat and a stranger bleeding in a ditch, Danielle Carter was somebody again. Danielle's past made her the only person on that highway qualified to save Anthony Grant's life. But the rescue isn't over yet. And what happens when Anthony wakes up and discovers who saved him? That's when this story truly begins. Anthony Grant was not born rich. That's the part most people get wrong. He grew up in Newark, New Jersey, 14 miles from the ditch where he almost died. His mother, Gwendolyn Grant, raised 2 children in a 3-room apartment above a check cashing store on South Orange Avenue. She worked 3 jobs: morning shift at a hospital cafeteria, afternoon shift cleaning offices downtown, weekend shift at a laundromat that smelled like bleach and broken dreams. Gwendolyn never complained. Not once. Not when the heat got shut off in January. Not when she had to choose between groceries and the electric bill. Not when Anthony's father disappeared, owing 6 months of rent and leaving nothing behind but a closet full of empty promises. She told Anthony one thing every single morning before school. She'd stand at the door in her cafeteria uniform, hair already pinned back, name tag already on, and she'd say, "You're going to be somebody, Anthony. You're going to make all of this mean something." And he did. Full scholarship to MIT at 17. Computer science. Graduated top of his class. Built his first app in a dorm room that was smaller than the bathroom in his current penthouse. Sold it for $200,000 before he turned 21. Used that money to start GrantTech, a fintech platform that made banking accessible to people who'd never had a bank account. The irony was beautiful. A kid from the projects building technology for people just like the ones he'd grown up with. By 30, he was worth $50 million. By 35, $500 million. By 40, the company went public, and Anthony Grant was worth $14 billion. Forbes 400. Magazine covers. Speaking invitations from Davos to Dubai. A penthouse on the 62nd floor of a building in Manhattan, where the elevator required a fingerprint scan and the lobby had a waterfall. The penthouse had 4 bedrooms. Anthony used one. The other 3 collected dust and silence. He owned 3 cars: a Porsche Cayenne, a Range Rover, a Tesla. He drove none of them. His driver, a man named Curtis, took him everywhere. Anthony hadn't pumped his own gas in 6 years. Hadn't cooked a meal in 4. Hadn't grocery shopped in so long he wasn't sure what milk cost anymore. His watch collection was worth $2 million. $47,000 for a Patek Philippe he'd worn once to a gala and never touched again. $47,000. The same amount Danielle Carter was trying to stretch across a week to feed 2 children. While Danielle was changing bedpans at $13.50 an hour, Anthony was negotiating a deal worth $800 million. While she was counting quarters from the laundromat tip jar to buy Malik's inhaler, he was approving a corporate retreat in Aspen that cost more per person than her annual salary. They lived 22 miles apart. They might as well have been on different planets. But the money had cost him everything that mattered. His mother Gwendolyn died 5 years ago, pancreatic cancer. She'd been in hospice for 2 weeks. Anthony had visited 3 times. He'd planned to be there at the end. Had blocked the whole afternoon on his calendar. But the board called an emergency meeting about a merger. His chief of staff said it would only take an hour. It took an hour and 20 minutes. Anthony arrived at the hospice 20 minutes after his mother's heart stopped. His sister Keisha was sitting beside the bed holding their mother's hand, tears running down her face. "You missed it," Keisha said. "She asked for you." Right at the end, she said your name. Keisha hadn't spoken to him since. 2 years of silence. 2 years of calls that went to voicemail. 2 years of birthday texts that got no reply. His ex-wife Renee had been more direct. She'd stood in the doorway of their bedroom with a suitcase in her hand and said 6 words that still echoed in Anthony's skull at 3 in the morning when the penthouse was quiet and the city lights blurred through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "You don't know how to be human anymore, Anthony." She was right. He knew it then. He knew it now. He'd built a machine. A perfect, profitable billion-dollar machine. And somewhere inside it he'd lost the boy from Newark, whose mother worked 3 jobs and told him every morning that he was going to be somebody. He'd become somebody. He'd just forgotten to stay someone. Anthony Grant could buy anything. Private jets, private islands, private doctors on standby. But trapped in that ditch with a broken leg and blood in his eyes, and gasoline soaking into his clothes, he couldn't buy the one thing he needed most. Someone who gave a damn. Danielle found what she needed on the embankment. A fallen branch, thick as her forearm. About 3 feet long, solid oak, not rotten. She tested it against the ground. It held. In combat medicine, they call it an emergency extraction. Moving a casualty when staying put is more dangerous than moving them. You don't do it unless you have to. And the rules are simple. Spinal alignment, you never twist. You pull straight. You protect the head. You accept the risk because the alternative is worse. The alternative here was fire. Danielle wedged the branch under the edge of the collapsed dashboard, right where it pinned Anthony's shin. She braced one end against the doorframe and pushed down on the other. Leverage. Simple physics. The same principle she'd used to pry open a jammed Humvee door outside Kabul with nothing but a tire iron and adrenaline. The metal groaned. Shifted. Half an inch. Then an inch. Then enough. Anthony screamed. The sound came from somewhere deep, the kind of scream that doesn't come from pain alone, but from the body understanding what's happening before the mind catches up. His leg was free. Danielle moved fast. She positioned herself behind his head, slid her forearms under his armpits, locked her hands across his chest, kept his spine as straight as she could, kept his head aligned with his neck, and pulled. He was heavy. 190 pounds, maybe 200. Dead weight because he was barely conscious now, his head lolling back against her shoulder, his breathing shallow and ragged. She pulled him through the shattered driver's window. The broken glass scraped against his back, tore through his shirt. She didn't stop. She dragged him across the wet grass, away from the car, away from the gasoline, away from the sparking wires. 15 feet. That was the distance she needed. 15 feet of separation between a man and a fire that hadn't started yet. She laid him on the grass, checked the belt tourniquet, still tight, still holding. The bleeding had slowed to a seep. She checked his breathing. Shallow but even. No gurgling, no blood in his mouth. His lungs were still clear. She leaned close and shone her phone flashlight into his eyes. Both pupils contracted, equal and reactive. That meant his brain was getting blood. That meant no major head trauma. That meant he had a chance. "Mama!" Nia's scared. Malik was standing at the minivan door again. Nia was in his arms, her face buried in his neck, her small body shaking with sobs. She was too tired to make loud. "I know, baby. Tell her Mama's coming. Count to 100 for me, okay? Nice and slow. I'll be there before you finish. Go, now." She watched Malik carry his sister back into the van. 7 years old and already taking care of someone else. Already doing what needed to be done without being asked twice. She'd taught him that. Or maybe he'd learned it the same way she had, by watching. 2 minutes later, the Porsche caught fire. It started small. A flicker near the engine block where the electrical sparks had been dancing all night. Then a soft whoosh as the gasoline vapors ignited. Then the whole undercarriage was burning orange and blue flames licking up through the crumpled metal, consuming the leather seats, the navigation screen, the $1,200 phone still lying on the passenger floor. The heat hit Danielle's face from 15 feet away. She looked at the fire, then looked at Anthony, lying on the grass beside her. 2 minutes. That's what separated Anthony Grant from a headline and a funeral. The ambulance arrived 11 minutes later. 2 paramedics came down the embankment with a stretcher and a trauma bag. They found Anthony on his back unconscious, but breathing a leather belt cinched around his upper thigh, gauze taped over his forehead, his body positioned in textbook recovery posture. The lead paramedic, a woman in her 40s, knelt beside Anthony and examined the tourniquet. She looked up at Danielle. "Are you a doctor?" "No. I used to be a combat medic." The paramedic studied her for a moment, the kind of look that says more than words. Then she nodded. "You saved his life. That tourniquet bought him at least 10 minutes. Without it, he would have bled out before we got here." Danielle didn't answer. She watched them load Anthony onto the stretcher, start an IV, strap an oxygen mask over his face. She answered the police officer's questions, gave her name, her phone number, her address. Nobody asked if she was okay. Nobody asked if she needed anything. Nobody offered her water or a blanket or a ride home. She walked back to the minivan. Malik was in the front seat, now his arm around Nia, who had cried herself to sleep. He looked up at his mother with eyes that were too old for 7. "Is the man going to be okay, Mama?" "I think so, baby. I think so." Danielle got behind the wheel. Her hands were shaking. She looked down and saw Anthony's blood on her fingers under her nails smeared across her palms. She gripped the steering wheel and drove home. It was 1:14 in the morning when she carried Nia inside, 1:20 when she tucked Malik in, 1:30 when she stood at the bathroom sink and watched brown water swirl down the drain as she scrubbed a stranger's blood off her hands. She didn't tell anyone what she'd done. Not her neighbor, Miss Yvonne, not her coworkers, not her mother back in Baltimore. She went to bed on her sofa, pulled the thin blanket up to her chin, and stared at the ceiling until her alarm went off at 5:30. Danielle went home that night and didn't tell anyone what she'd done. She washed the blood off her hands, tucked her children in, and went to bed. She assumed she'd never see Anthony Grant again. She was wrong. Anthony woke up in a private room on the VIP floor of Morristown Medical Center. White walls, fresh flowers, a heart monitor beeping steadily beside his bed. His right leg was in a cast from ankle to knee. His ribs were wrapped. His left thigh was bandaged and throbbing under what felt like 100 stitches. His assistant, Devon, was sitting in the corner, scrolling through a tablet. His lawyer, a man named Patterson, was on the phone by the window, speaking in the low, controlled voice that lawyers use when they're already calculating liability. Anthony's first word was not, "Hello." It was not, "Where am I?" It was not, "How long have I been out?" "What happened?" Devon looked up. "Sir, you were in an accident. Single vehicle. Route 22. Your car went off the road. You've been here for 31 hours. Anthony tried to sit up. His ribs screamed at him. He stopped. The doctor came in. Dr. Okafor. Calm eyes. Direct. She explained it clearly. Fractured tibia. 3 broken ribs. A penetrating wound to the left thigh from a piece of the dashboard. Significant blood loss. "Mr. Grant," she said, "I want to be straightforward with you. Without the tourniquet that was applied at the scene, you would not have survived long enough for the paramedics to reach you. The laceration in your thigh nicked a vein. Not an artery, but a significant vein. You were losing blood at a rate that would have resulted in hypovolemic shock within minutes." Anthony stared at her. Who did it? Dr. Okafor glanced at her chart. The police report indicates a woman named Danielle. No surname recorded. She was driving a minivan and had 2 young children with her. "A woman with kids stopped for me." According to the report, yes. She applied an improvised tourniquet using a leather belt, extracted you from the vehicle, and performed basic triage. The paramedics noted that her work was consistent with advanced medical training. Anthony lay back against the pillow. The ceiling was white and smooth and expensive. How many cars passed before her? Dr. Okafor paused. The report says 14 vehicles were captured on a highway camera passing the accident site before the minivan stopped. 14. Anthony let the number sit in his mouth. 14 drivers. 14 people who saw a broken guardrail and skid marks and decided it wasn't their problem. 14 people who assumed somebody else would handle it. And then the 15th car. A minivan with 187,000 miles on it, and 2 sleeping children in the back, and a woman who made $13.50 an hour. Devon leaned forward. "Sir, the media's calling. TMZ, CNN, Forbes, They want a statement about the accident. Anthony didn't look at him. Find the woman. The one who stopped. I don't care what it costs. I don't care how long it takes. Find her. Sir, we only have a first name and a vehicle description. Then start there. His phone rang. A number he hadn't seen in 2 years. He picked up. Keisha's voice was careful, guarded, the voice of someone who'd built a wall and wasn't sure if she wanted to take it down yet. I heard about the crash. You okay? I'm alive, Anthony said. Some woman pulled me out of the car. A stranger. With her kids in the back seat. Silence, long and heavy. The kind of silence between siblings who have too much to say and no idea where to start. Then Keisha said 5 words that hit Anthony harder than the crash. Mama would have done the same thing. Anthony didn't answer. He pressed his lips together. His eyes burned. He blinked and felt something wet slide down his temple into the pillow. After Keisha hung up, Anthony lay there for a long time. He looked out the window at the skyline of northern New Jersey. He could see Manhattan in the distance. His penthouse was there, his office, his empire. He'd built a company worth $14 billion. He employed 12,000 people. He had lunch with senators and dinner with CEOs. He owned art he didn't look at, and watches he didn't wear, and a penthouse with 4 bedrooms he didn't sleep in. But when he was dying in a ditch, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was a woman named Danielle and a first aid kit from Dollar Tree. Anthony's team moved fast. That's what money does. It accelerates everything. Within 48 hours, his head of security, a former FBI agent named Clarkson, had pulled highway camera footage from the New Jersey Department of Transportation. The footage showed a dark blue Honda Odyssey minivan model year 2011 pulling over at 11:17 p.m., approximately 90 seconds after passing the accident site. The license plate was partially obscured by mud, but Clarkson's team enhanced the image enough to run it through the DMV database. Danielle Marie Carter, 34 years old. Address in Irvington, New Jersey. That was day 1. Day 2, Clarkson handed Anthony a folder. Thin, just the basics. Anthony opened it in his hospital bed. His ribs ached every time he turned a page. Danielle Carter, single mother. 2 children, Malik, age 7, Nia, age 4. Employed as a nursing aide at Sunrise Senior Care Irvington. Night shift. Hourly wage $13.50. No health insurance through employer. Second job at Clean Sweep Laundromat. Day shift, $9 an hour. Anthony read every line, then he read it again. Former United States Army. Military Occupational Specialty, 68 Whiskey. Combat Medic. 3 deployments to Afghanistan. 17 confirmed medical saves in combat situations. Awarded the Bronze Star with Valor for actions during an IED attack outside Kandahar. Anthony stopped reading. Bronze Star. He said it out loud. To nobody. To the empty room. To the flowers that someone had sent and the machines that were keeping track of his heartbeat. Bronze Star. He kept reading. Current status. Honorably discharged. Diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder upon return. Applied for VA disability benefits twice. Denied both times. Reason cited. Insufficient documentation. No appeal filed. Divorced 3 years ago. Ex-husband awarded the house and primary vehicle. Danielle retained custody of both children. Ex-husband ordered to pay child support of $400 per month. Payments received in the last 12 months. 0. Outstanding medical debt. $14,200. Primary cause. 2 emergency room visits for her son's asthma ages 6 and 7. Insurance coverage at time of visits. None. Vehicle. 2011 Honda Odyssey. Mileage. 187,000. Air conditioning non-functional since previous summer. Registration current. Insurance current but minimum coverage only. Anthony closed the folder. $14,000 in medical debt. For Anthony, that was the price of a weekend trip to the Hamptons. For Danielle, it was a weight she carried every single day. A weight that followed her to work and waited for her when she got home and sat on her chest while she tried to sleep on a sofa in a 1-bedroom apartment while her children shared the only bed. He picked up his phone, called Clarkson. I need more. Her military record. Everything you can find. 2 days later, a second folder arrived. This one was thicker. The IED incident was detailed in an after-action report that Clarkson had obtained through a contact at the Department of Defense. The language was military, clinical, but the facts were staggering. On March 14th, during a routine convoy movement outside Kandahar, the lead vehicle struck an improvised explosive device. 2 soldiers were trapped. The vehicle was on fire. Ammunition inside was detonating from the heat. All personnel pulled back to a safe distance per standard operating procedure. Specialist Danielle Carter did not pull back. She advanced toward the burning vehicle under fire from small arms, extracted PFC Williams through the rear window, returned to the vehicle, and extracted CPL Davis 11 seconds before the fuel tank exploded. Specialist Carter sustained shrapnel wounds to her left shoulder during the extraction. She continued to render medical aid to both casualties for 47 minutes until medevac arrived. Both soldiers survived. Anthony put the folder down. He looked out the window. Then he looked at his hands. Clean, manicured, soft from years of doing nothing harder than typing on a keyboard. He thought about Danielle's hands, the ones that had pulled soldiers from fire, the ones that had wrapped a belt around his thigh, the ones that were probably right now at this very moment changing sheets at a nursing home for $13.50 an hour. He called Devon. She saved soldiers. She saved me. And she can't afford her son's inhaler. Devon said nothing. There was nothing to say. Set up a meeting, Anthony said. But don't tell her who I am. Not yet. I want to see where she works. I want to understand her life before I show up in it. How many people like Danielle are out there right now? People who served, people who sacrificed, people who saved lives in places most of us will never go, and who are now invisible, forgotten, struggling to survive in the country they fought for. If you don't know the answer, that's the problem. 1 week after she saved Anthony Grant's life, Danielle Carter's alarm went off at 5:30 in the morning. She'd gotten home from her night shift at 3. That was 2.5 hours of sleep. It felt like 10 minutes. She lay on the sofa for exactly 45 seconds, not because she was being lazy, because her body needed those 45 seconds to remember how to move. Her back ached from lifting Mr. Patterson into his wheelchair at 2 in the morning. Her shoulder, the one with the shrapnel scar from Kandahar, throbbed the way it always did when the weather turned cold. Her hands were dry and cracked from the industrial soap at the nursing home, the kind that strips everything off your skin, including the parts you need. She got up. She made coffee. Black, no sugar, because sugar cost money, and coffee was the only meal she was having this morning. She poured cereal for Malik and Nia, store brand, the kind that comes in a bag instead of a box, because the bag is 80 cents cheaper. She poured milk, checked the jug. Enough for tomorrow. Maybe. Malik came out in his school clothes, backpack already on, because Malik was the kind of 7-year-old who got himself ready without being asked. He'd been that way since he was 5, since the divorce. Since he'd figured out that his mother was doing the work of 3 people, and the least he could do was button his own shirt. They ate at the kitchen counter, because there was no table. Danielle leaned against the sink and drank her coffee and watched her children eat and felt the kind of love that hurts because you can't give it everything it deserves. In the car, Malik asked a question that Danielle wasn't ready for. "Mama, you ever think about being a nurse again? Like a real one?" Danielle kept her eyes on the road. "Maybe someday, baby. Someday." The word poor people use when they mean never. She dropped Malik at school, kissed Nia's forehead, and left her with Miss Yvonne next door, who watched Nia during the day in exchange for Danielle cleaning her apartment on Saturdays. Not a business arrangement. A survival arrangement. The kind of economy that exists below the poverty line where people trade what they have because none of them have money. Danielle worked the morning shift at Clean Sweep Laundromat. 4 hours of folding strangers' clothes, matching strangers' socks, pressing strangers' shirts, on a machine that burned her forearms if she wasn't careful. $9 an hour, no benefits. No breaks longer than 10 minutes. Between shifts, sitting in her minivan in the parking lot, Eating a granola bar that was supposed to be Malik's after-school snack, she checked her mail on her phone. An envelope from Malik's pulmonologist. She opened it already, knowing what it would say. $340. That was the copay for Malik's inhaler prescription. Medicaid covered part of it, not enough of it. $340 for the medicine that kept her son breathing. Danielle opened her banking app, looked at the number, $127. She closed the app. She sat in the parking lot for 3 minutes, staring at nothing. Then, she drove to Sunrise Senior Care for her night shift. At the nursing home, she changed Mr. Henderson's sheets. She bathed Mrs. Okafor, who had dementia so advanced she didn't recognize her own daughters, but still hummed hymns from her childhood church in Lagos. She administered medications. She answered call buttons. She mopped up a spill in the hallway and restocked the supply closet and documented vitals for 11 patients. At midnight, she sat with Mr. Jeffries. He was 86, Alzheimer's. He'd been a jazz musician in Harlem in the 1960s. Played trumpet at clubs that don't exist anymore. Now he didn't know what year it was. Didn't know where he was. Didn't recognize the staff, or the walls, or the food on his tray. But every single night, at exactly the same time, he'd look up at whoever was in the room and ask the same question. Is my wife coming? His wife Dorothy had died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. The staff had been instructed to redirect. Change the subject. Don't upset him. Danielle never redirected. She'll be here soon, Mr. Jeffries. She's on her way. And he'd smile, and close his eyes, and sleep. That was the kind of care Danielle Carter provided. Not the kind that shows up on a chart or gets measured by a metric. The kind that holds a dying man's world together with a sentence he needs to hear. The kind that treats a person like a person even when the system has already decided they're just a bed number. She didn't tell anyone about the highway. Not Miss Yvonne, not her coworkers, not her mother in Baltimore. When Miss Yvonne noticed the bruises on Danielle's arms from dragging Anthony out of the wreck, she'd said, "Girl, what happened to you?" "Tripped at work," Danielle said. "Fell into a supply cart." That was it. No story, no drama, no social media post. Danielle had saved a man's life 3 days ago, and she hadn't mentioned it to a single person, because in Danielle's world you don't do the right thing for attention. You do the right thing because it's the right thing. And then you go to work. Danielle wasn't an exception. She was the rule. In the United States, women veterans are nearly twice as likely as civilian women to be unemployed. More than half of post-9/11 veterans with PTSD never receive adequate treatment. Over 37,000 veterans are homeless on any given night. Thousands more live one paycheck away from it. They served. They sacrificed. They came home to a country that thanks them with bumper stickers and forgets them with budgets. She had saved a man worth $14 billion, and she still couldn't afford her son's medicine. Danielle thought that night on the highway was just another moment of doing the right thing when no one was watching. She had no idea that Anthony Grant was already looking for her, and when he found her, the life she'd built on exhaustion and silence was about to crack open. Anthony showed up at Sunrise Senior Care on a Tuesday night at 9:15. He was wearing jeans and a gray hoodie and leaning on a crutch. No driver, no assistant, no entourage. Just a man with a limp and a scar on his forehead that was still pink and healing. He walked up to the front desk. The receptionist, a woman named Gloria who'd worked there for 12 years and had seen everything, looked up from her crossword puzzle. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Danielle Carter." "Is she working tonight?" Gloria's eyes narrowed. The way they do when a man shows up asking for a woman at her job. "Who's asking?" Anthony paused. "Someone she helped." Gloria studied him for a moment. Then she picked up the phone and called the East Wing. Danielle came around the corner 2 minutes later. She was wearing her sunrise scrubs, the ones that had been washed so many times, the blue had faded to gray. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes had the heavy look of someone who'd been awake for 19 hours. She looked at Anthony. No recognition. She'd only seen him in the dark, covered in blood, barely conscious, hanging upside down from a seatbelt. The man standing in front of her looked different. Thinner, clean, upright, human. Can I help you? You already did. Silence. The kind that fills a room like water. I'm Anthony. From the highway. 3 weeks ago. Danielle blinked. Once, twice. Then her hand went to her mouth. Her eyes went wide. Oh my God. You're alive. Because of you. 2 words. But they landed in that nursing home lobby like a grenade. Danielle stood there. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to do. Nobody had ever come back before. Not the soldiers she'd saved in Afghanistan. Not the patients she'd helped at sunrise. You save someone and they disappear into whatever life comes next, and you never know what happened to them. That's how it works when you're invisible. You do the work and you vanish. But here he was, standing in her nursing home, looking at her like she mattered. She led him to the break room. A small room with a table that wobbled, a microwave that smelled like old soup, and fluorescent lights that buzzed like tired insects. She poured him coffee from the communal pot. It was terrible coffee. He didn't seem to notice. Anthony had attended galas where the centerpieces cost more than Danielle's monthly salary. He'd sat in boardrooms with mahogany tables worth more than everything she owned. He'd dined at restaurants where a single bottle of wine exceeded her rent. But sitting in that nursing home break room, under lights that hummed and flickered, holding a styrofoam cup of burnt coffee, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Gratitude so deep it hurt. I looked into you, Anthony said. I know about your service, Afghanistan, 3 tours, the Bronze Star, what you did for those soldiers, and I know about everything after. Danielle's jaw tightened. The warmth left her eyes. You investigated me. I wanted to understand who saves a stranger's life at midnight with 2 kids in the car. Danielle looked at him for a long time. Then she said something that Anthony would remember for the rest of his life. I didn't stop because I'm special. I stopped because nobody else did. The break room was quiet. The fluorescent light buzzed. Somewhere down the hall, a call button chimed. I want to help, Anthony said. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's a debt. You saved my life. I owe you. Danielle shook her head. You don't owe me anything. That's not how saving people works. You don't save someone and then send them an invoice. You save someone because they need saving. That's it. That's the whole thing. Anthony opened his mouth to respond. But Danielle was already standing up. I appreciate you coming, she said. I'm glad you're okay. Really. But I have patients to check on. She walked back to the East Wing. Anthony sat in the break room alone. The coffee got cold in his hand. He could hear the faint sound of a call button, the hum of the lights, the shuffle of soft-soled shoes on linoleum. He'd come here, expecting gratitude to be a transaction. Offer money. Receive thanks. Balance the ledger. Move on. But Danielle Carter didn't want his money. Didn't want his gratitude. Didn't want anything from him at all. And that made what he owed her feel even larger. 3 days later, an envelope arrived at Danielle's apartment. No return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $100,000. No letter, no note, just the check. Danielle looked at it for a long time. Then she put it back in the envelope, sealed it, and mailed it back. She included 1 sentence on a scrap of paper torn from Malik's homework notebook. I told you, you don't owe me. Anthony received the returned check in his penthouse. He stood at the kitchen counter that cost more than Danielle's car and stared at her handwriting. Small, neat. The handwriting of someone who was careful with everything because she couldn't afford to waste anything, not even ink. He tried again. Called her at the nursing home. Gloria transferred him after the 3rd attempt. At least let me pay your son's medical bills, Anthony said. I know about the inhaler. I know about the debt. Let me take care of that one thing. Danielle was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that hit Anthony like a truck. If you want to help veterans, help all of us. Don't just help me because I happen to save someone who can afford to say thank you. There are thousands of us. Medics, nurses, soldiers who came home broken and got handed nothing. You want to make things right. Don't write me a check. Fix the system. The line went quiet. Anthony sat in his penthouse that night. The lights of Manhattan spread out below him like a circuit board. $14 billion of view. And for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about stock price or board votes or acquisition targets. He was thinking about a question. Not how much money can I give one person, but why does the system let people like her fall through the cracks in the first place? He called Keisha. She picked up on the second ring. They still weren't okay, but they were talking. That was something. She told me something Anthony said, the woman who saved me. She said if I want to help, don't just help her. Help all of them. There was a pause. Then Keisha said, "She sounds like Mama." Anthony closed his eyes. "Yeah, she does." He hung up. He sat with it. Sat with the weight of what Danielle had said and the echo of his mother's voice and the feeling that maybe for the first time since Gwendolyn Grant died in a hospice room 20 minutes before her son arrived, Anthony was being given a second chance to become the kind of person his mother had raised him to be. He called Danielle one more time. "I'm not going to send you money," he said, "but I want to build something for veterans like you. A program that helps combat medics transition into civilian medical careers, real credentials, real jobs, real support. And I need your help to design it. I don't want consultants who've never served. I want someone who knows what it's actually like to come home and have the country forget everything you did. Will you at least hear me out? One meeting. That's all I'm asking." Silence. Long. Heavy. The kind of silence where a life pivots on a single word. "One meeting," Danielle said. "That's it." The Grant Tech building was 42 stories of glass and steel on West 57th Street. The lobby had a waterfall feature made of imported marble. The security desk was staffed by 4 people in matching suits. The elevator played soft jazz and required a badge scan for every floor. Danielle walked in wearing her cleanest jeans and the one blouse she owned. A white button-down she'd bought at Goodwill for $3 2 years ago from Malik's school conference. She'd ironed it that morning on the kitchen counter because she didn't own an ironing board. She felt every pair of eyes in that lobby on her. The receptionist, the security guards, the woman in heels carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Danielle's rent. She felt the familiar weight of not belonging, the quiet certainty that she was in the wrong place. But Danielle Carter had walked into a combat zone under fire. She'd crawled through dust and blood and shrapnel to pull soldiers out of burning vehicles. She'd held dying men's hands and told them they were going to be fine when she wasn't sure they would be. A fancy lobby wasn't going to break her. She walked to the front desk with her back straight and her shoulders square. The way the Army had taught her. The way her mother had taught her before that. Danielle Carter. "I have a meeting with Anthony Grant." They sent her to the 41st floor. Anthony was waiting in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. There was a presentation on a screen. Slides. Data. A logo that read, "Grant Veterans Bridge Program." Anthony stood when she walked in. Still on the crutch, still healing. He gestured to a chair. "Thank you for coming." Danielle sat. She looked at the slides. She looked at the logo. She looked at Anthony. He walked her through the plan. A 2-year program designed to help military medical personnel, combat medics, field nurses, surgical technicians, transition their skills into civilian healthcare careers. Fully funded. Free tuition, housing assistance, child care provided. It was polished, professional, expensive. Danielle listened to the whole thing. Then she asked one question. "Who designed this?" "I hired consultants," Anthony said. "McKinsey. A team that specializes in veteran reintegration programs." "Fire them." Anthony stared at her. "Excuse me, fire them. Your consultants don't know what we need. They've never been deployed. They've never come home to nothing. They've never had a VA office lose their paperwork 3 times. They're designing a program based on what they think veterans want, not what we actually need." The room was quiet. Anthony's chief of staff shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The consultant's slides glowed on the screen behind them, suddenly looking very expensive and very useless. "Tell me," Anthony said, "what do you actually need?" And Danielle did. "Mental health support first," she said. "Before anything else. Before job training. Before certifications. You put a veteran with untreated PTSD into a classroom and they're not going to learn. They're going to sit there with their back to the wall watching the door. You have to stabilize people before you educate them. Trauma-informed counseling. Not the VA kind, where you wait 6 months for an appointment. Real, immediate, ongoing support. She kept going. Mentorship from veterans who've already made the transition. Not civilians, not academics, people who've been through it. People who can look you in the eye and say, I know what 3 a.m. feels like when you can't stop hearing explosions. That matters more than any textbook. Legal advocacy. For veterans who've been denied disability benefits. For veterans whose military records got lost or miscoded. For veterans who gave up on the system because the system gave up on them first. And childcare. Real childcare. Not a stipend. An actual facility with actual people. Because most of the veterans who need this program the most are single parents. And you cannot ask a single mother to attend classes for 8 hours a day if she has nowhere safe to leave her children, Anthony was writing. Not on a laptop, on a yellow legal pad, by hand. He hadn't taken handwritten notes in years. His assistants did that, but right now in this room, he wasn't a CEO. He was a student. Here's the thing most people don't understand about military medical training. A combat medic in the United States Army receives more hands-on trauma training in 6 months than most civilian nursing students receive in 4 years. They perform procedures under fire that civilian paramedics only read about in textbooks. Intubations, chest decompressions, emergency amputations. They do it in dust storms and darkness with equipment that would make a civilian ER doctor weep. But when they come home, none of it counts. The certifications don't transfer. The experience doesn't register. A medic who saved 17 lives in Afghanistan can't get hired as an EMT in New Jersey without starting from scratch. It's not incompetence. It's a credentialing gap, a bureaucratic failure that wastes expertise the country already paid to develop. Danielle knew all of this. She'd lived all of this. And now, sitting in a conference room on the 41st floor of a building she never would have entered on her own, she was designing a solution. Anthony looked at her when she finished. Looked at her the way he looked at people who were about to become very important in his life. I was going to ask you to be a participant in this program, he said, but I think I need you to be the director. Danielle almost laughed. I'm a nursing home aide. Anthony leaned forward. You're a combat medic with a Bronze Star 17 saves and the only person on a highway full of people who stopped. You're the director. The first 6 months were the hardest. Danielle didn't quit her job at Sunrise Senior Care. She couldn't. Poor people don't take leaps of faith. They take careful steps, 1 foot in front of the other, 1 paycheck at a time. So she worked the Grant Veterans Bridge program during the day and pulled night shifts at the nursing home 3 times a week. She slept 4 hours a night, sometimes 3. She lived on coffee and determination and the stubborn refusal to let this thing fail before it had a chance to breathe. The program launched in a converted office space in Newark. Nothing fancy. Fluorescent lights. Donated furniture. A whiteboard that Danielle bought at Staples with her own money because the requisition form would have taken 2 weeks. She didn't have 2 weeks. She had 14 veterans sitting in folding chairs on the first day looking at her with the same expression she recognized from the mirror. Tired, skeptical, hoping for something but afraid to say it out loud. The resistance came fast. The New Jersey Board of Nursing refused to recognize the program's training model. Their position was clear. Military medical certifications are not equivalent to civilian credentials. Period. It didn't matter that these veterans had performed emergency surgeries in combat zones. It didn't matter that they'd saved lives under conditions no civilian nurse would ever face. The paperwork didn't match. The boxes didn't check. The system said no. The lawyers said it couldn't be done. Anthony's legal team, the same team that had won cases against the SEC and the Department of Justice, looked at the credentialing gap and told him the regulatory framework wasn't built for this. You'd need to change laws. In multiple states. That takes years. 3 hospitals in the Newark area declined to participate as clinical partners. one administrator told Danielle directly. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but we can't put uncredentialed personnel in patient contact. It's a liability issue." Danielle listened. She nodded. Then she flew to Washington. Anthony's foundation paid for the trip. Danielle wore the same Goodwill blouse. She sat in a congressional office across from a representative who had never served in the military, never treated a patient, and never changed a bedpan. She told him her story. Not the car crash. Her story. Afghanistan. The Bronze Star. The 17 saves. Coming home. The rejections. The nursing home. The $13.50 an hour. Then she said one sentence that ended up on the front page of 3 newspapers. "I saved 17 soldiers in a war zone, and I can't get a nursing license in my own country." How does that make sense? It didn't make sense, and suddenly people were paying attention. But attention doesn't build programs. Work builds programs. And for the next 6 months, Danielle did the work. She redesigned the curriculum herself, pulling from her own military training manuals, consulting with VA physicians who actually understood combat medicine, building a bridge between what her veterans already knew and what the civilian system required them to prove. She brought in counselors who specialized in PTSD, not because it was in the original plan, because she knew from her own experience that you can't teach someone pharmacology at 9 in the morning if they spent the night reliving an IED blast at 3. You stabilize first, then you educate. She recruited mentors, veterans who'd already made the transition, a former Army nurse who was now an ER charge nurse in Philadelphia, a retired Navy corpsman working as a paramedic in Camden. People who could look a struggling veteran in the eye and say, "I know exactly where you are. I've been there. Here's how you get out." 14 veterans completed the first cohort. 12 had jobs within 6 months. One of them was Jerome Washington, former Marine. 2 tours in Iraq. Came home to a country that didn't have a place for him. Lost his apartment. Spent 11 months in a shelter. Applied for 37 jobs. Got 2 interviews. 0 offers. Jerome finished the bridge program in 14 months. Passed his EMT certification on the first try. Got hired as a paramedic in Newark, the same city where he'd been sleeping in a shelter 18 months earlier. He wrote Danielle a letter. Handwritten, blue ink on lined paper. "You didn't just give me a job, you gave me back my identity. For 5 years I was a number. A case file. A veteran who fell through the cracks. Now I'm a paramedic. I save people. I matter again. That's because of you." Danielle kept that letter in her desk drawer. She read it on bad days. There were a lot of bad days. Anthony changed too. Slowly. The way glaciers move. You don't notice it happening until you look up and the landscape is different. He started visiting the nursing homes where veterans worked, started going to community hospitals and VA clinics, started sitting in shelters and listening to stories that made his board meetings feel like theater. He reconnected with Keisha. Not all at once, in pieces. A phone call that lasted longer than 5 minutes. A dinner that didn't end in silence. A Saturday afternoon helping her move into a new apartment because she'd asked and he'd said yes without checking his calendar first. He learned to cook. Danielle taught him. Nothing complicated. Rice and beans, baked chicken. The kind of food you make when you're feeding kids on a budget. They'd stand in the program's small kitchen after the veterans went home, and she'd show him how to season without measuring, and how to tell when oil is hot enough, and how to stretch one chicken into 3 meals. It wasn't romantic. It was something rarer than that. It was 2 people from the same broken city who'd taken completely different paths through the world and ended up in the same kitchen learning from each other. Respect. Friendship. The kind of bond that forms when you save someone's life and they decide to spend the rest of theirs trying to deserve it. A year ago, Danielle was changing bedpans for $13.50 an hour. Now she was presenting to Congress. A year ago, Anthony couldn't name a single veteran who worked for him. Now he knew 14 by first name, knew their kids' names, knew their stories. One evening, Danielle got a phone call from Malik's school. His teacher, Mrs. Coleman, was on the line. "Miss Carter, I wanted to call you personally. Malik wrote an essay today for our family writing assignment. The topic was someone in your family who did something brave. Danielle's hand tightened on the phone. He wrote about you, Mrs. Coleman said. He wrote about the night you pulled a man out of a car on the highway. I don't know the details of what happened, but I've been teaching second grade for 15 years, and it is the most beautiful essay I've ever read from a child his age. That night, after Nia was asleep, Malik brought Danielle the essay. 2 pages, handwritten. The letters were big and careful the way 8-year-olds write when they're trying to get every word exactly right. My mom saved a man's life. Danielle read it, standing in the kitchen. She got to the last line and had to sit down. Malik had written, "My mom is not famous. She is not on TV. But she stopped when nobody else did. And that makes her the bravest person I know." Danielle pressed the paper to her chest and cried. Not the quiet kind. The kind that comes from a place so deep you didn't know it was there until something cracked it open. But this story isn't just about Danielle and Anthony. What happens next, the ripple effect of one decision on a dark highway, will show you why stopping for strangers is never just about one person. 2 years after the night on Route 22, the Grant Veterans Bridge program had trained 89 veterans. 74 had full-time jobs in civilian healthcare. 3 states had adopted the program's training model. The United States Congress was reviewing a bill called the Military to Civilian Medical Credential Act, a piece of legislation built on a framework that Danielle Carter had designed on a whiteboard in a converted office in Newark. CNN ran a feature on Danielle. The segment aired on a Wednesday evening. 4 million people watched a woman in scrubs tell a reporter about the night she pulled a billionaire out of a burning car with a Dollar Tree first aid kit and 2 children asleep in her minivan. The interviewer asked her how it felt to be called a hero. Danielle looked into the camera. "Don't make me a hero. Make the system better. I don't want a statue. I want every combat medic who comes home to have a path to a real career. That's not heroism. That's common sense." Anthony used his platform. He committed $50 million to the program over 5 years. He personally called the CEOs of 3 Fortune 500 companies and convinced them to join as corporate sponsors. He testified before a Senate subcommittee. He told them about the night he lay bleeding in a ditch while 14 cars drove past. He told them about the woman who stopped. He told them about the belt from Walmart that saved his life. And then he told them about the system that almost let her disappear. "This woman has a bronze star," he said. "She saved 17 soldiers. She saved me. And when she came home, the best job she could get was changing bedpans for $13.50 an hour." That's not a personal failure. That's a national one. But the moment that mattered most to Danielle didn't happen in Congress or on CNN. It happened in Baltimore. One of the veterans from the Bridge program's 3rd cohort was a young woman named Alana Brooks, 26 years old, Army medic, 1 tour in Syria, came home with nightmares and no job prospects, entered the program at rock bottom, graduated near the top of her class, got certified as an EMT in Maryland. She was assigned to a station in West Baltimore, the same neighborhood where Danielle Carter had grown up, the same blocks where Charlene Carter had walked to work every morning in her home health aide uniform, the same corner stores with the bulletproof glass. One night, Alana responded to a call. A 6-year-old girl having a severe asthma attack. The girl's mother was panicking. The inhaler was empty. The ambulance was still 4 minutes out. Alana got there first. She administered a nebulizer treatment from her jump bag. She kept the girl breathing. She kept the mother calm. She stayed until the ambulance arrived, and then she stayed after that because the mother was shaking too hard to hold a pen and someone needed to fill out the paperwork. The little girl's name was Destiny. She lived on the same street where Danielle had grown up. 1 stop on a dark highway. That's all it took. One woman who decided that 2 sleeping children in the back seat were not a reason to keep driving. They were the reason to stop. Because what do you teach your children if you drive past someone dying? Danielle stopped. Anthony built. Danielle designed. The program trained Alana. Alana saved Destiny. On the same street where it all began a generation earlier, when a mother named Charlene told her daughter, "You don't walk past someone who needs help." Alana wrote Danielle a letter. I became an EMT because of you. Last night I saved a little girl having an asthma attack in West Baltimore. She's 6 years old. She's going to be fine. I thought you'd want to know." Danielle read the letter at her desk. Not the break room at Sunrise anymore. A real desk in a real office with a window that looked out over Newark. Different building, different title, different life. But the same sky she'd looked up at from every place she'd ever been. Kandahar, Baltimore, the highway shoulder where she'd knelt in the mud and pulled a stranger from a wreck. Same sky. Same woman. Same choice, echoing forward. 3 years after the night on Route 22, Danielle Carter stood in front of a classroom. 22 veterans sat before her. New cohort, new faces. Same look in their eyes. The look that says I've been through something and I don't know if anyone here understands. Danielle understood. She held up a belt. Brown leather, worn soft. The same one she'd cinched around Anthony Grant's thigh on the side of a highway 3 years ago. "This belt saved a man's life," she said. "Not a medical tourniquet, not a fancy device. A $12 belt from Walmart, because sometimes the tools you have are enough. You just have to know how to use them." She paused, looked at the room. "That's what this program is about. You already have the skills. You already have the knowledge. You already have the hands. We're just going to give you the credentials the system requires so that the rest of the world can see what you've always been. Qualified, capable, ready." In the back row, a man sat quietly. He'd come in without anyone noticing. No crutch anymore. No limp. Just a man in a plain jacket who liked being in this room more than any boardroom he'd ever sat in. Anthony caught Danielle's eye across the room. She gave him a small nod. He gave one back. Nothing more was needed. Some debts can never be repaid. Anthony knew that. He'd stopped trying to repay it. Instead, he was trying to be worthy of it, to build something that deserved the sacrifice that had made it possible, to become the kind of man that the woman who saved him would respect. Not because she asked him to, because she showed him what it looked like to care about something bigger than yourself. After the class, Danielle walked into the hallway and found Malik waiting on the bench by the door. He was 10 now, tall for his age, quiet in the way that thoughtful children are quiet. Nia was beside him, drawing in a notebook, her tongue poking out the side of her mouth, the way it always did when she was concentrating. Malik looked up. "Mom, can I learn the tourniquet thing?" Danielle tilted her head. "Why?" "Because I want to be like you. I want to stop when nobody else does." Danielle knelt down so she was eye level with her son. She looked at his face. She saw the boy who had been 7 years old in a minivan on a dark highway, holding his crying sister, calling out, "Mama, Nia's scared." A child who had already been taking care of someone else before he knew what that meant. "You already do, baby. You already do." That night, after both children were asleep, Danielle sat on her couch. Not the old couch in the one-bedroom apartment. A new couch, in a 2-bedroom apartment that she paid for with a salary she'd earned. Nia had her own bed now. Malik had his own room. Small victories. The kind that mean everything when you know what it's like to have nothing. She called her mother in Baltimore. Charlene picked up on the first ring. The way mothers do when their children call. "Mama, you remember what you used to tell me. You don't walk past someone who needs help. I don't care how tired you are," I remember Charlene said. "I said it every day. I know. And I finally understand why you were always so tired. Because stopping is hard. It costs you something every time. Your sleep, your energy, your safety. But you did it anyway, every single day. And you taught me to do it too." Charlene was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I didn't teach you that, baby. I just showed you. You're the one who learned it." Danielle hung up. She sat in the quiet of her apartment. She could hear Nia breathing through the thin wall. She could hear the distant sound of traffic on the highway below. Some people are born into wealth. Some people earn it. And some people carry something more valuable than money, the willingness to stop when the whole world keeps driving. Thank you for following Danielle and Anthony's journey. From a dark highway in New Jersey to the halls of Congress. From a Dollar Tree first aid kit to a program that has changed hundreds of lives. From a woman the world forgot to a voice the world needed to hear. If this story moved you, if it made you sit a little longer than you planned, if it made you think about the last time you drove past someone who might have needed help, then please subscribe to this channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Because stories like this don't just entertain, they remind us who we could be if we stopped long enough to try. You might feel invisible right now. You might feel like the world has forgotten what you've done, what you've sacrificed, what you carry. Maybe you served your country and came home to silence. Maybe you work 2 jobs and nobody sees how hard you fight just to keep the lights on. Maybe you have skills and knowledge and experience that the system doesn't recognize because it doesn't fit neatly into a box on a form. But your knowledge matters. Your experience matters. Your willingness to stop when nobody else does. That's not ordinary. That's extraordinary. And somewhere out there right now, there is someone in a ditch who needs exactly what you have. Not your money, not your title, just your hands and your heart and your decision to stop. Leave a comment below. Have you ever stopped to help a stranger when nobody else would? What happened? I want to hear your story. Because every story like Danielle's starts the same way. One person, one moment, one choice. Until next time, stay blessed, stay brave. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop. Now, before I go, I want to share something personal. I wrote this story because I've been one of those 14 cars. I'll be honest about that. I've driven past someone on the side of the road and told myself someone else will stop. Someone more qualified, someone with more time, someone who isn't running late or tired or afraid. And it haunts me. It haunts me because I know the truth. I was choosing comfort over conscience. I was choosing easy over right. I wanted to tell this story because it reminds all of us, including me, that stopping is a choice. And it's a choice that can change everything. Not just for the person in the ditch, for you, for your children, for the world they grow up in. This is a fictional story created for educational and inspirational purposes. The characters and events are not real. However, the issues raised in this video are very real. The bystander effect is a well-documented psychological phenomenon. The struggles of veterans transitioning to civilian careers affect thousands of Americans every single day. And the gap between military medical credentials and civilian licensing requirements remains one of the most overlooked policy failures in our country. If you or someone you know is a veteran in need of support, please visit va.gov or call the Veterans Crisis Line at 988, then press 1. All names, places, and events in this story are fictional. Any resemblance to real persons living or dead is entirely coincidental.